Happy Monday. Let's get off the rails with the Chat Breaker Show for a little special episode. We'll see how these things work out. I need you to watch them. I need you to share them. I need you to participate, engage. Then maybe we'll do more of these because we need to get back to a little bit to the headlines here. I'm sitting here looking at my phone. I'm looking at pictures that people are sending me from Augusta, Georgia. Augusta, Georgia, is my hometown. It's where I grew up. And I'm looking at neighborhoods that I don't recognize anymore. The ones I grew up running around in, being a part of. I see homes, I see streets, I see places that I recognize, places that were a part of my life. They're gone. They're disintegrated. Augusta's not getting all the attention because, as we know, North Carolina, who's not getting enough attention, if you ask me, North Carolina is not getting enough attention as well. Because, they're wiped away. These towns don't exist anymore. The areas surrounding Asheville, people talk about Asheville. Asheville's a big tourist community. It's a well-known town. Beautiful place. But the little areas around that, the little towns around it, they're gone. They're wiped out. And so I'm sitting here looking at these pictures. And it's like I'm frustrated sitting here. I want to be in my truck driving east right now. Instead, I said, I don't want to go be in the way. I don't want to get in the middle of something and be a hindrance. So we've been raising money this last week. We've been raising money. I've spent a good bit of money out of my own pocket trying to help those in need. You can go to givesendgo.com/Augusta if you want to contribute. Like if everyone that's a part of this show or everyone on my social media gave $1, it would be amazing. There's a lot of people out there that are pissed off. And I want to talk to you about a meeting that FEMA had in regards to their disaster planning. It's going to blow your mind if you realize what the bureaucrats who are truly in charge are doing. You guys have heard me say this many times. The people that you, quote, elected, those aren't the people who are running the show. It's the 4 million bureaucrats who have been appointed. And the funny thing about a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. is once they get appointed, the people who appointed them most of the time can't even fire them if they do a shitty job. So now we're up against bureaucrats who have no skin in the game, who are the decision makers. You're a taxpayer. You funded all of this government spending out there. They're printing money ad nauseum. And then last week, Camala Harris, who is the de facto commander-in-chief, I guess, since Joe Biden can't be found. Joe Biden, they ask him, well, what do you think about these storm zones? He's like, what storm? What storm zones? What are you talking about? Oh, the storms. He doesn't have a clue what's going on. Dementia-in-chief is absentee. He's AWOL. So Kamala Harris flies down to Augusta, Georgia, stands behind the podium of the vice presidential seal in the midst of fallen pine trees behind her and says that she's going to give emergency management assistance to the people who have been affected by the storms from Hurricane Helene, $750 to qualifying people. Every person that I've talked to, when they've called in or they've applied, they have been immediately denied the $750. And if you read the fine print, in most of the cases, the $750 has to be paid back within a year. This is bullshit. It's bullshit. What's the word for it? It's bullshit. So $750 that you got to pay back, $750 is going to get you, 2-3 nights in a hotel room, which you can't get because those areas, because of emergency management crews that are in there. God bless the men and women, the linemen that are getting the power back on. I just heard from my sister-in-law in Augusta, Georgia, they've just lifted the water restrictions. They can now get more than one bottle of propane at a time. That's been problematic because people are having to cook with gas on their stoves, on their grills, and they were rationing only one canister of propane per customer. Bad situation. So they've lifted the water restrictions. They've lifted the propane. People they still have no power. Certain parts of Augusta, they're getting some power back on. I'm hearing some people are texting me. They're letting me know that the power is back on in certain areas. North Carolina, Western North Carolina, absolutely devastated. But they had an emergency management meeting, and your $750 be damned, Kamala, because let me tell you something. It's not that the $750 is such a low number. It's that you've given millions upon billions of dollars to foreign countries and aided illegals that are in this country that you've either allowed to cross the border, dispersed into the interior of the United States, or you've literally flown them into the country. You've done it. We know that. And the fact that the money's gone somewhere else, you saw my truck video the other day that went viral in various places where I said it's like a husband giving his wife's diamonds to his mistress. It ought to piss every American off. Now, if it's not pissing you off, then that means you have no empathy and you're not being touched with these infirmities, because crisis one day may touch you, it may touch your family, and the insult of saying we've given billions of dollars to illegals in this country, but we're going to give you $750 as a literal slap in the face. It is a black eye to the American taxpayer. What you should do April 15th is you ought to send the federal government $750 when it's time to pay taxes and say, there, we're square, done deal, finished. That's it. And tell them to kiss your ass. Put it on a little note, a little Post-it note, and say, hey, kiss my ass. Pucker up right here. Not on the cheeks, not on either side. I want you to get right in the middle of the crack of my ass, pucker up, and kiss it. That's what I want you to do. And, oh, by the way, here's your $750. Screw yourself. Screw yourself. And here's the other thing, by the way. Wow, before I get to this, emergency management agency meeting that's leaked by End Wokeness on X, let me just tell you something about this whole thing, because I'm seeing a lot of these so-called social media content creators who are saying it's Trump's fault because Trump defunded FEMA and the Republican Congress didn't pass the bill for FEMA to get more money. Okay, dumbass, let me tell you, those of you who say that, you're stupid. You literally can get on Google, which is a biased search engine, and you can see that Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House, and the Republican Congress, they allocated, I'm going to say this slowly for those of you in the back, they allocated $20 billion for federal emergencies. That money goes to FEMA. They allocated 20 billion, that's with a B, like bitch, Kamala, $billion. That's good until December 20th. You know what that does? It gets us through this hurricane season, which, by the way, as you well know at this point, some freakishly weird eastbound hurricane is going to hit landfall Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern in Central Florida as a Cat 5 hurricane. So buckle up, Florida. It's coming your way. And Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of Homeland Security, that human walking piece of lint has... Human is a strong word to say. I shouldn't call him that. That dingleberry butt lint, Alejandro Mayorkas, has said that we don't have the money. Sorry, America, we don't have the money to get through this hurricane season, so you're screwed. They allocated $20 billion. To say that the Federal Emergency Management Agency doesn't have money or funding because of a Republican Congress is stupid. It's asinine. It's ignorant. Even Newsweek reported on this. $20 billion. Where's the money? Where's the money? Well, interestingly enough, Kamala Harris and Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, both put on their Twitter accounts or whatever, dweeb intern posts on their Twitter accounts, their X accounts, and said, because of the humanitarian crisis in Lebanon, we're now going to allocate $157 million to the citizens of Lebanon. You know who's in Lebanon? Hezbollah. You remember Beirut? Remember the Beirut bombing? 1982. That Lebanon, not Lebanon, Tennessee, not Lebanon Township, North Carolina. No, Lebanon, like Lebanon. They're sending $157 million over there, but they've allocated $4.7 million to hurricane relief victims in the United States of America. Now, you can't be any more tone deaf than these pieces of just absolute excrement. These people are the stuff that comes out of the porta potty when you drain it after a 4-day music festival where everybody's been high, smoking crack, and having sex in the woods. Like, they're literal diarrhea that's been sitting on top of other people's diarrhea that's now being drained into the tank. These people are garbage. You can't get any lower than these people that in the middle of an American crisis, when people are dying, they're lying about the body counts. They're lying about the damage. They're lying. They're saying FEMA has this under control. I put out a post the other day that said that FEMA is actually confiscating goods that are being brought in by private citizens. They're going to, and people came at me and they said, no, they're not. They're not doing that. That's not happening. Bullshit. It's not happening. Oh, it's happening. They have grounded private helicopters and aircraft. Pete Buttigieg came out and said that he didn't want any more drones flying over the area. And you're like, oh, don't you understand? You're so stupid, Chad. Don't you realize that could interfere with airspace of actual people the actual people who are out there flying their hillbilly helicopters into those mountains and taking a look for survivors and dropping off supplies. They're flying over the drones. They're not worried about the drones. These drones are being used to look for survivors and look over damaged areas. People are actually walking their goats up into these mountains, hiking up into these mountains, on mules, going up into these mountains, taking supplies to people that you can't get there by road. There was one gentleman, I read the story, where he hiked 11 and a half miles up into the mountain to go check on his parents. 11 and a half miles he walked because there's no road anymore. Just mud and slop and slosh and gross. And he's walking up there. So Buttigieg comes out and says, okay, no drones. Well, the reason they didn't want the drones flying is because President Pee-Pee Pads, Joe Biden, had to come into North Carolina and make an appearance, and they had to fly in Kamala Harris. So they wanted to make sure that the air was clear so that, the dignitaries could come in and flaunt their colors. Why? Why are you going to stop people, citizens, who are actually doing the work from finding survivors and aiding survivors when you know good and damn well FEMA is not doing their job? They were not doing their job. Do you know how many military members that were there, that are on site, that I've talked to personally, other friends of mine who are in the same business I'm in, who have talked to these people and they said, we're here, we're waiting on deployment orders. And they weren't getting them. They weren't getting them. Finally, they let them mobilize and move out to some degree. But we're hearing from actual people, boots on the ground, that the goods aren't getting to these people. Why? Because they're getting held up by bureaucrats. And I'm going to tell you why they're being held up by bureaucrats in just a minute. They're being held up by these bureaucrats with FEMA. And so you can ask yourself this very poignant question: who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the bureaucrats? Are you going to believe the talking head media? Are you going to listen to the campaign lefty progressive Riri liberals who are trying to get Kamala DEI Harris elected, selected, placed, whatever, in November 5th? Are you going to listen to those people who can't let a good crisis go to waste, and therefore they're going to politically blame a Republican Congress, which now we've disproven as BS? The funds are allocated. Are you going to believe those talking heads? Or are you going to believe the people who are suffering, who are on the ground? Listen, all you got to do is get on TikTok. All you got to do is get on X, get on Instagram. Go and listen to these people's stories. They're not hard to find. I'm looking at the freaking pictures. My sister-in-law called me on the phone the other day. She said there's a government man. He's driven the truck down here. It was a county official, county assessor. He'd driven down the driveway. We grew up in the woods. He drives down the road, comes down there. She walks out to talk to him, hoping that some form of assistance is there. I had just spent $10,000 cutting trees, having trees cut off of my mother's house and off the property there. He comes down and says, well, it looks like y'all didn't get too much damage down here. And she goes, well, let me show you some pictures. He said, I don't have time to look at pictures. She said, then what the hell are you doing here? Why are you here? He says, well, we're just assessing things. Get the hell off our property. We don't need your assessment. We need your help. See, that's the deal with government bureaucrats. They want to assess everything rather than lend an actual helping hand. Meanwhile, standing in the way of the people who have mobilized and have moved out, whether it's the Cajun Army, whether it's Grindstone Ministries, whether it's the hillbilly helicopter pilots, whoever it may be, these people flying drones, these people who are bringing water, bringing propane, bringing charcoal, bringing supplies, bringing food, bringing filtration systems, who are bringing their backhoes, their bobcats, their track loaders, all of these things, the track hose, and moving stuff out of the way in order to rescue people. No, the bureaucrats want to sit around and have a meeting. Oh, and by the way, a picture emerged of one Director of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. This guy says Simonson, Joe Gabriel Simonson on X. He says, for context all about the FEMA stuff, he posts a picture of Alejandro Mayorkas walking in his navy golf shirt, his little polo, his loafers, and his khakis. He's walking through the store there, and he's carrying his little shopping bag. Says, I saw Alejandro Mayorkas this afternoon at Sid Mashburn, apparently a pretty richy kind of a department store there. He said, it's the second time I've seen him there on a Saturday afternoon in about a month. So suffice to say, the guy isn't working around the clock. Now, they said they're working around the clock to help these people. But on, that day, there is Alejandro, old Alex Mayorkas. He's out there shopping, places that have $150, $200 belts. He's out there getting himself taken care of shopping. Vice President Knee Pads, Kamala Harris, is on the Call Her Daddy podcast while the storms are badgering people in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Florida. She's on an adult podcast, kind of one of those little saucy ones, where you talk about sexy things. And they're saying, oh, people got to see a Kamala Harris that we haven't been able to see. She knows what she's doing. Why doesn't, if she wants to play chief officer, why isn't she out there getting the damn job done? I don't care how many little bags, how many little boxes of travel toothpaste she shoved in a Ziploc bag for a photo opportunity. I don't care how many little boxed sandwich lunches she cackled about while she was handing them to people. Oh yeah, cities and towns are being washed away in mudslides and swollen rivers, but you're out there doing a photo op. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has teamed up with Elon Musk, and they have sent millions upon millions of dollars in Starlinks to get people connected and communicating once again. And I mean, it's been an effective deal. Jason Aldean just gave away $500,000, gave away $6 million that Donald Trump was able to raise through a GoFundMe. That's right, a former president of the United States raising $6 million through a GoFundMe campaign. Jason Aldean gives it away. Tell me how many GoFundMe campaigns. Oh, no, see, that's the thing. They'll spend your money. They'll spend your hard-earned taxpayer money at the threat of your freedom being lost, and they'll give it to illegals. They'll send $157 million to Lebanon. They'll send $4 billion to Israel. They'll send, $40 billion, whatever the number was, over to Ukraine, so that the little midget president over there can keep dancing around in his little green scrubs and look like he's a military man. They'll keep sending that stuff. They'll send billions of dollars to illegals in this country so that when you come in here, you could be human trafficking. You can come across the border bringing fentanyl in your butthole. You can have all kind of stuff. You could be a horrible human being. 663,000 people have been released into this country with a criminal record, including homicide and rape. But they're out there awaiting processing, free, walking our streets. We're in a crisis, folks, but you know what? They're going to get a $5,800 debit card. They're going to get shelter. They're going to get moved into apartments. Forget homeless veterans. Forget American citizens. Forget that. And Joe Biden's going to say, you're going to get all the aid you're going to need. Well, where the fuck is it, Joe? Like, really, where is it? I'm sorry that you guys are so bureaucratically twisted up in knots on the inside that you guys can't do the right freaking thing. You're trash. You're garbage. These bureaucrats are going to kill us. They're going to kill us. And I'm going to tell you why they're going to kill you. It's all about equity. So FEMA comes out, has a meeting. They have a meeting. They're all part of Homeland Security. They're tasked with stabilizing and assisting communities after a disaster. So Hurricane Helene hits. We all know they came up short. To answer the poignant question from earlier, I'm going to believe the boots on the ground. I'm going to believe the testimony of the people out there who are going, this is some bullshit. We're not getting our stuff taken care of. So their top strategic goal, now if you go to the FEMA website, their top strategic goal is to, quote, instill equity as a foundation of emergency management. Rather than making sure people are fed and watered and saved, let's make sure that we utilize our ideology, because all of that life-saving stuff, that's going to be subordinate now to making sure that everyone feels equitable.
Sparked a few things in my mind, thinking about preparedness and how you said, LGBTQIA people and people who have been disadvantaged already are struggling. They already have their own things to deal with. So you add a disaster on top of that. It's just compounding on itself. And I think that is maybe the why of why we're having these discussions, is because it isn't being talked about. It isn't being socialized. We're not paying attention to this community. Thank you so much. Maggie.
Thank you. There are a couple of things that are intersecting in my mind here. One of them is the culture of emergency management as an organization, as an industry in the United States specifically, not abroad. This has, and my cat sometimes does this, she gets really loud suddenly, so you'll have to just allow for the little meowing in the background. The shift that we're seeing right now is a shift in emergency management from utilitarian principles where everything is designed for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to disaster equity. But we have to do more, right? And so this topic is intersecting, I think, with a number of other topics where we have to look at policies and understand to what extent they have disadvantaged communities that had less assets, communities that had pre-existing vulnerabilities in accessing disaster-related recovery supports.
So they have this meeting. This woman by the name of Maggie Jari. She's a senior emergency management specialist at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. She said, there's a couple of things intersecting in my mind here. This is in that video. She said, one is the culture of emergency management as an organization. Did you now unpack that? Unpack that. The culture of emergency management as an organization. If I'm drowning, I don't care if it's a black hand or a red hand or a yellow hand or a white hand or a little pink hand or a little midget hand. I really don't care. I don't care if it's like a little curled up paw that ain't got but 2 fingers on it. I don't care what it is that's reaching below the waters to pull me up so I can get some of that life-saving oxygen back into my lungs. Just reach in the fucking water. But here's what she says. She's worried about the culture of the organization. She says it's an industry in the United States specifically, and she says the shift that we're seeing right now is a shift in emergency management from utilitarian principles, where everything is designed for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people, to disaster equity. I say the F-bomb a lot, Shy, in my personal life. I think because there's no word stronger to me. Like, it's the one that gets my exclamation point across. I'm sorry if that offends your delicate ears, but, FEMA said this, and I quote, underserved communities, as well as specific identity groups, often suffer disproportionately from disasters. Can I read that again to you? Listen. Underserved communities, as well as specific identity groups, often suffer disproportionately from disasters. As a result, so basically, yes, that's true. Poor people, they're hit harder when a disaster hits because they don't have the means and the resources to dig themselves out. Now, that's not what they're saying, though. It's not just poor. They mean something else. It says, as a result, disasters worsen inequities already present in society. So there's the victim cycle. This cycle compounds the challenges faced by these communities and increases their risk to future disasters. By instilling equity as a foundation of emergency management and striving to meet the unique needs of underserved communities, the emergency management community can work to break this cycle and build a more resilient nation. They said proactively prioritizing actions that advance equity for communities and identifying groups that have historically been underserved or disproportionately affected by disasters is critical for their resilience. Now, let me tell you what that means. That means that these bureaucrats are going to refashion our country into something more equitable. Can somebody say communism? And their whole diversity, equity, inclusion plan, they say it can't be optional. These are quotes. They must be core components of how the agency conducts itself internally and executes its mission. So what do they mean by that? Do they mean poor people? No, not necessarily, because there's a lot of poor people in Appalachia. I've talked to them. I've spoken on the phone with them as they can get a signal. I'm going to introduce you to some of them in the coming days. We're going to have some special off-the-rails episodes where we're going to talk to these people. The apparent obsession with groups, immutable characteristics, and sexual preferences, that would explain why the same disaster preparedness meeting, Riley Hurst, who's a financial management specialist at FEMA, spent time concern-mongering. This is an article from blaze.com about the possibility that illegal alien transvestites, those for whom Kamala Harris would have taxpayer-funded sex changes, might be misgendered in shelters. Yeah, so their whole deal is they're saying you might be poor, you might be somebody up in Appalachia, but if you're not a transgender, lesbian, black person with 3 testicles, then we got to make sure that you, who have been historically discriminated against, that you get prioritized. Forget the white dude named Joe Bob who's drowning in the river and whose house is under 30-foot walls of mud and muck. Forget that guy. He has not been historically discriminated against. Why? Because he's a white dude in America, so he must have some form of privilege. Now, forget the coal miners out there with the black lung who are breathing up dust and dying of cancer and who have scraped everything they can, put it away in a mason jar for a rainy day, and now the mudslides and the swollen rivers have washed the rainy day fund in the mason jar, so that it's down in Tennessee at this point, or washing out into the Atlantic Ocean. Forget those people. No, we got to make sure that the people who have historically been underserved by the American government, they're the ones who equitably are going to get taken care of first. So see, the $750, that's strategic. And the reason people are being denied when they call in and they ask, hey, how do I get my $750? Because, something is better than nothing, right? And they go, well, nope, you're immediately denied. You know why? Because I just told you. Because Federal Emergency Management Agency does not consider you to be their diversity beneficiary. You ain't black enough. You ain't oppressed enough. You haven't been victimized enough. You aren't female enough. You aren't gay enough. You aren't all these damn labels out there to make sure that they can go home and sleep at night with the power on in their comfortable bed and their water running, food in the pantry. So it's not about saving the most lives. It's not about that. Elon Musk responded to that video of the FEMA meeting, and he said saving American lives should be priority number 1. Someone said DEI ideology is a social scourge. And right now we're watching it get people killed. So what's going to happen when Hurricane Milton hits on Wednesday? What's going to happen? Is FEMA going to show up? Nah, they'll make a show of showing up. The vice president will make a show of making a statement. But they're out of money. Who's spending it? Well, the illegals, the Ukrainians, the Israelis, the Palestinians, the Lebanese. They're the ones spending your hard-earned taxpayer dollars. Now, there's no shortage of money. There is no shortage of money when Volodymyr Zelensky comes to town. There's no shortage of money. But they want to blame a Republican Congress and say, well, the FEMA hasn't been funded because Donald Trump defunded it. First of all, let me explain something to you. If you'd get the F out of the way, the American people would pull together. Yeah, we want our tax. You know what? We want our taxpayer dollars, the stuff that we've paid in. Be cool if, like, maybe you just refunded everybody all their tax dollars that they paid all these years. Why don't you just refund that and say, you know what, y'all fix it yourself? Because I promise you, there's some good old boys named Jed and Joe that can jump on a backhoe and get those bridges rebuilt, get that mud pushed out of the way, and get some transportation going once again. They can. I promise you, they can. They know how to do it. They're the ones who are building the freaking roads in the first place when the government hires them to go out there and do it. I promise you, there's a way to get deliveries and packages, because this is the best that you'll ever see. This is the best and worst that you'll ever see of humanity. You'll see the worst when it comes to political, bureaucratic bullshit, and you'll see the best when it comes to people who consider one another neighbors and who are out there lending a helping hand without any thought whatsoever to what their skin color is or their socioeconomic status or what their historical disparities have been. DEI is not crossing the lips of people who are out there bringing the water bottles and on the radios and walking through these canyons and trekking up into these woods and bringing supplies to these people who need them so badly. And like most everything, just like the Maui fires, it'll just be a matter of time before they sweep all of this under the rug too. And the people suffering in Asheville, in Appalachia, the people in Augusta, Georgia, the people all over the South of the United States of America, they're going to be forgotten once again because they're going to move on. Don't forget the fact that it's going to be difficult in these next couple of weeks to get people to the polls because we have a very important presidential election. We have very important ballots that need to be filled out by individuals. Are they going to make it? We'll see. Mayorkas also said, I think it was Mayorkas, we might as well attribute it to him. And it's all one big group think at this point in time anyway, because they're all saying the same thing. But at this stage in the game, you know what? They've said, well, it won't be hard for Democrats to get to the polls, but in these affected areas, it'll probably be harder for the Republicans to get to the polls. That ought to tell you everything you need to know. We're off the rails, folks. Go to watchchad.com. It's where all the fun stuff is. We're headed out on the road. Always find me down the road. If you want to give sendgo.com/Augusta. I also recommend Mercury One. I recommend Samaritan's Purse. I recommend Grindstone Ministries. There's a number of places that you can give. Do not give to the Red Cross. Do not give to the government. Be careful with the churches you give to. Make sure that they're the right ones. If you can put it in the hands of the individuals, all the better. But make sure that you're doing your part, because let me tell you something. The rest of the world, all they have is a bunch of damn excuses. A bunch of damn excuses. Let's not play political games with people's lives. I love you. God bless you. Whew, thanks for letting me get that off of my chest. If you like it, share it, and we will do it again later. Take care. Bye.